Congressman Sean Duffy is next, but first, a little news to share with you. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reaffirmed the U.S.'s commitment to the Middle East and the ongoing battle against ISIS during a news conference in Egypt on Thursday. Pompeo is in talks with Egyptian leaders on a 9-country Middle East tour that seeks to reassure leaders in the region after the president recently announced the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Syria. The president also delivered a primetime address from the Oval Office on Tuesday, calling for Congress to dedicate $5 billion for his border wall. Trump called the situation a growing humanitarian and security crisis, and he urged Democrats to fund border security and end the partial government shutdown. On Wednesday, President Trump walked out of a meeting with Democrat leaders Senator Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi after they refused to compromise on border security spending, continuing the partial shutdown. The president has threatened to declare a national emergency to build the wall if Congress does not act. Joining us now to talk about all of this and much more, I'm joined by the House Financial Services Committee member and U.S. Congressman from Wisconsin, Sean Duffy, the man now refilling Maxine Waters' water
glass. So Maxine is our new chair of financial services. We're going to get a lot of work done in that committee.
Okay.
A lot of investigations maybe and a lot of impeachment talk, but I don't know how much on actual financial services.
Well, we will check in with you throughout the year to see how that relationship is developing.
Stay tuned.
The president made the case for border security on Tuesday night from the Oval Office. Here's what he had to say.
The only thing that is immoral is the politicians to do nothing and continue to allow more innocent people to be so horribly victimized. How much more American blood must we shed before Congress does its job? When I took the oath of office, I swore to protect our country, and that is what I will always do.
How effective do you think this message was in reaching the American people?
Well, let's first be clear. The liberal media and the Democrats are messaging together. And they're putting pressure on President Trump to open up the border, and folks aren't getting paychecks, and there's not a crisis at the border, it's manufactured. And it's important that President Trump, he's a one-man band in regard to messaging, that he go out and talk about the importance of border security, not just for the American people. So we have, we have drugs, meth and heroin, 90% of it comes over the southern border, ravaging communities like mine in Wausau, Hudson, Superior. But we have MS-13 gang members and other criminals. 17,000 migrants with criminal records were caught at the border last year alone. 17,000. That doesn't count the people we didn't catch. So a huge number of people with criminal convictions are coming into the United States. But not only that, 400 people who made that very dangerous journey died last year alone. 400 people. And as the president mentioned in the address, a third of women are sexually assaulted. That's a number that comes from Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah.
So not only do you have a crisis for the migrants with an open border that incentivizes them to make a 2,000-mile journey to our border, but also we have the security and safety concerns that we have inside of our country. And so I think the president is right on. And listen, I don't know that he's the best, scripted and where he can't deviate from the teleprompter and he's sitting down. So he's better in other formats. But you know what? You sit in the Oval Office. Everyone has a Twitter account. Only one guy has an Oval Office. And that he uses it, I thought was important.
I want to play this for you. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Leader Chuck Schumer responded to the president's address. Here's some of what they had to say.
The president is rejecting these bipartisan bills which would reopen government over his obsession with forcing American taxpayers to waste billions of dollars on an expensive and ineffective wall.
President Trump has appealed to fear, not facts, division, not unity. There's an obvious solution. Separate the shutdown from arguments over border security.
What's wrong with that argument?
Well, first off, Democrats spent almost $1 trillion on an infrastructure bill 10 years ago that didn't build any infrastructure. This is $5 billion that will secure our border. So when they're talking about money, I don't buy that argument, number one. But number two, walls work, and that's why Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama have all voted for border funding in the past. And so when they say, hey, listen, this is a waste of money, well, why did Chuck Schumer vote for the Secure Fence Act in 2006? And why did he vote for a plan in 2013 to give us fencing and border wall at the southern border if it didn't work. The truth, Raymond, is the fact that Democrats know walls work. They want border security. The problem is they hate the president, and the president ran on border security. They don't want to give him a win. They just want to resist him. Now, with that said, there was a lot of debate about whether Nancy and Chuck were able to give an address to the nation after President Trump, because this was somewhat political.
Right.
I thought it was brilliant. I come from Wisconsin, a relatively 50-50 seat. And the more that Chuck and Nancy from San Francisco and New York can talk to my constituents, the more middle America sees that they're out of touch.
I have to say, I thought the real coup here was not that President Trump sat behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, which was fine. The real coup was that he drew Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer into that very bizarre long hallway.
Deflection back.
They almost looked like something. They looked like those two little girls in The Shining. Come play with us. Come play with us. It had the staging of it was peculiar, and they're sharing the podium. Couldn't they have had two podiums? We couldn't afford two.
Right.
But anyway, I'm getting into theatrics. But the reality here is compromise possible, given that the president really believes, and I should say, I was at this off-the-record luncheon with the president.
You were?
This
Okay,
week
good.
With these anchors. They were like, I don't know, 13
Were you
of us
the
around
leak?
table. I was not the leak.
Good to hear.
I have suspicions of who the leaker was.
It wasn't you.
It was somebody at that table, this is like Clue, somebody at that table leaked to the New York Times. But I can tell you it wasn't Brett Baer or me.
Okay.
Or David Brody. I can assure you it wasn't those three people. But what I got from that, without revealing anything, the president is entrenched on this issue. He is not going to move because he does believe that this border wall is needed for national security. And I do believe, talking to friends of mine who work in the Democratic caucus, that the Nancy Pelosi staff believes this would be a political win for the president, and they can't give it to him now.
That's right.
And she's holding the purse strings.
So, as you know, negotiation takes a willingness on both sides. You and I are both married. If we think that we can get 100% in a negotiation with our wives, we're crazy. If we get 30%, I know your wife. If you get 25%,
I get 10%, baby.
So, I mean, that Nancy Pelosi has come out and said, I'm going to give you not more than $1 for the wall. And President Trump has said, listen, I'm willing to negotiate. I want $5.7 billion for border security, but let's talk. Maybe there's a different number that works for you. Maybe we can bring in some DACA. But you can't negotiate with someone who doesn't want to negotiate with you. So, yes, we can find a compromise, but you can't compromise with people who don't want to sit at the table and they want to bludgeon you. So
Nancy Pelosi says this is an immoral wall. The wall is immoral itself.
What's immoral is that women are being sexually assaulted on this trip, that people are dying, that Officer Singh was killed as an officer in California from an illegal immigrant. Listen, I heard the Democrats talk about, migrants commit less crimes than non-migrants, American citizens. I don't know about the facts of that, but I'll tell you what, if you come into our country, I want no one to commit a crime. And if you have a criminal record, you don't belong here. And if you have a criminal record and you come in and commit more crimes, shame on us for not securing our border. Officer Singh should still be alive, and countless others. And to say that it's a manufactured crisis when you have real families who will never see their children again, or their father again, or their spouse again, we have a duty to say, hey, listen, we're open. Let people come into our country, but good people who want to work, they want to live the American dream, but we should also have an assessment process so we can keep the bad ones out, Raymond.
Okay, on Thursday, the president went to the border to make his case. He was there in McAllen, Texas. On Wednesday, he met with Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. After the meeting, he tweeted this out. Just left a meeting with Chuck and Nancy, a total waste of time. I asked what's going to happen in 30 days if I quickly open things up. Are you going to approve border security, which includes a wall and steel barrier? Nancy said, no. I said, bye-bye. Nothing else works. Your reaction?
You know what? It just goes to show you that Democrats are not being honest players as we negotiate with them. They're saying, yeah, open up the government, Mr. President, and we'll negotiate. But they made it very clear they're not willing to negotiate with the president. And so, listen.
It's worse than that. Chuck Schumer said this, and I want your reaction to
Sure.
this. Chuck Schumer came out of that White House meeting. He said this on Wednesday.
He asked Speaker Pelosi, will you agree to my wall? She said no. And he just got up and said, then we have nothing to discuss, and he just walked out. Again, we saw a temper tantrum because he couldn't get his way, and he just walked out of the meeting. I asked him to open up the government, that tomorrow so many people will have trouble paying their mortgages, paying their bills, dealing with situations when they don't get paid.
How long can you keep this government closed with 800,000 workers, federal workers on furlough? I got to say, though, the traffic in D.C. is fantastic.
So, listen, Raymond, you have to admit that this is real hard for real Americans.
For these federal workers, you know, they live paycheck to paycheck.
Absolutely.
Some of them are not; they don't have the means to pay this.
Absolutely.
So there's real pressure here, human pressure.
And so it's incumbent upon Nancy Pelosi to sit down and negotiate a deal. And I think I've heard from some Democrat senators who say, listen, this is untenable. We can't keep our position at $1 when the president's willing to negotiate. And I'll tell you, most Americans might be a tick right of center or a tick left of center, but we all analyze fairness. And they want people to be fair in the negotiation. And I think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are losing because there's a perception that they're not being fair. They're not being honest brokers in the negotiation. And so I think the blame is going to come to them. And I mean, in Wisconsin, I don't know if you recall, Scott Walker was our governor. He went through a recall process. Scott Walker got more votes in the recall. My parents are Democrats. Didn't vote for him in any of his elections, but they voted for him in the recall because they said what Democrats were doing in the recall was unfair. I think Americans will say, you're not being fair. Sit down, negotiate, Nancy and Chuck, and open up the government.
And the polls show a plurality of Americans want that border dealt with. They believe there's a border crisis, 42%.
And that's with all of the media, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, all fighting with Democrats to message to the American people that Democrats are right and Trump is wrong, and still a plurality agree with the president. That's stunning at how right the president is.
8 Republicans peeled off. You all had some procedural votes the other day. 8 Republicans peeled off, but then I think it was 8 Democrats who also crossed the aisle and voted. Is this the beginning of the fracturing of the Republican unity on this? President says everybody's unified. Is that what you're seeing?
So we had a meeting a few nights ago with the Vice President. Kellyanne came, Secretary Nielsen came. And as we sat in the room and listened to the stats on the border and how important border security is, I think that our conference is unified. But let's be clear on one thing, Raymond. Democrats control the House, and it's a majority institution. So they can pass whatever they want. We don't have any control. But in the Senate, Republicans do control the Senate, but they have this 60-vote rule. There's 100 senators. You have to get 60 votes, which means you need 7 Democrats to vote with you. So you have to be more bipartisan in the Senate.
Yeah, but on any vote, Mitch McConnell can engage the nuclear option, which the president is asking for.
And I've asked him too. And us House members have asked him as well.
Which would just be 51 votes.
Well, and we could have done that before Nancy Pelosi took control of the House. Now that she's in control, it's hard to get a bill that's reasonable over to the Senate that he could invoke the nuclear option.
Was that a failure on the part of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell when they had both the reins of government? They should they have gotten the funding for the wall then? Was that a mistake?
Well, they always saw the problem that could they pass it in the Senate? But you know what? To try at the very end seems a little bit cheap. We should have been trying for 2 years to get the money to fund the wall. It would have been hard, but it wouldn't have been any harder than what we're going through right now. Right. And, it was great we got tax reform done. But you know what? We should have had a broader infrastructure package that Democrats support. And part of that infrastructure, you slide in your $5 billion for the wall. Everyone would have been a winner. People are going back to work. We have new airports, new bridges, new roads. It would have been great. I think we missed an opportunity.
Let me ask this question. The president is asking for $5 billion for the wall. But he's asking for $5 billion, it seems to me, over the same appropriation of $5 billion for 4 years.
Right.
He wants $20 billion.
So right.
To build the wall.
Originally, he wanted $25 billion.
Right.
So you can't spend all $20 billion in 1 year. So he said, okay, I can spend $5 billion, $5.7 billion a year over 4 years to complete this project to secure our border. And you're right. So you're going to need different appropriations throughout the time frame. Yeah. But I mean, what I find interesting is people say, well, walls are a 4th century tool.
17th century solution.
Well, we're using 17th century modes of transportation. People are walking like they did hundreds of years ago, and they work, and you can help funnel people into different points of entry so you can better assess them.
Is this declaring, the threat is he's going to declare a national emergency and get the military, use military funds and the military to build the wall. Is that a trap for the president? Some commentators have said he'll hit the tripwire of exceeding his powers and engage an impeachment process.
Well, I don't know that it'll engage in an impeachment process. What I do is I want to look over the horizon, and let's say we have President Elizabeth Warren, and she says we also have a crisis, and it's global warming, and I'm going to use the same authority that the president did for the wall. And guess what? We're going to impose new sanctions, new taxes on the American people to protect us from climate change or global warming. Be careful what you do today, because they may use that same authority, when they have the presidency. And so we got to be cautious on how we navigate this.
Yeah, and President Obama already exceeded
his authority.
Some of his authorities with the DACA kids, with some of the other things that he was doing, just kind of willy-nilly. Now the courts have come down on his side, however, so it's broadened the presidential authority, which I agree with you. I think that's a bad idea. I like a check and balance. Otherwise, the people have no voice.
And we're on a Catholic show, right? As we talk about walls, and if we look at the Vatican, what does the Vatican have around it?
Well, I heard a commentator on CNN the other day, whom I won't mention, say, but there's a big door. It's totally open in the middle.
And there's guards there.
No, it's not. You can't walk in. It's complete. The leaning, it goes all the way around, and there are two entrances: one to the Papal Palace, one through the Ark of the Bells. There are guards there, and there are gates. No, you don't get in. In fact, I often tell,
because they work.
Go walk through those gates and try to sit there with your family or get health care or a meal. See what happens.
Bring a tent too and see how it works for you. I mean, because the walls work. And again, I just want to close. We're compassionate. We want to help people out. But wouldn't it be better, Raymond, if we said, you know what, why don't you apply, at the American Embassy in your home country? If you get access, you can fly here, not take this long journey. You don't get sexually assaulted. You might not lose your life. It's a way more compassionate policy to secure the border and have a methodical, orderly process where people can come in, they can apply, and if they get it, they get here. But what we're doing to Central Americans is, I think, unfathomable when you talk about morality. This is the most immoral immigration platform that we have, that incentivizes people to go on this journey with kids and sometimes pregnant women.
Endanger them.
It really is a sad state of affairs, and we're better than what we're doing right now.
My big concern has always been, if you've gone to the border, as I have, and you've seen and talked to these families, the first thing you realize is they are coming here, they want a better life.
They do.
But by allowing them to come in this way, they're used on this side of the border by business interests that want to commodify them, and they're really shunned and consigned to a certain class that they can't break out of due to a language barrier, education barrier, on and on and on. We need an orderly process, and a compassionate one that gives these people their human dignity in the process coming in. And once they come into America, this is no way to treat anybody.
And one last point, we have full employment right now, and we need workers. And so Democrats will say, bring them in and help fill the jobs that are available today. Fair point. But this economy will turn at one point. And when it does, and Americans start to lose their job, all of a sudden the low-skill, lower-income Americans are going to be competing, like you mentioned, to lower-paid illegal immigrants. And it hurts our families. And that's why we have to really think through the long-term consequences of these policies and make it better for our country and make it better for the migrant.
Good conversation. Thank
Raymond,
you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We'll stay in touch and see you in the days ahead.